background music. The
Mm.
It's the candidate conversations. That's all we get this week. Ladies and gentlemen and others, everybody, welcome to the show. I'm super excited about these because I've been to a couple of forums now, and I have to tell you, I would much rather get audience questions than pre-rehearsed generalized questions that are designed not to insult or look like you're targeting one particular person because, so awful. So awful. So this week, Jill is back and Kyle is back. And we are joined this week with newbies, Andrea Getz, who's running for HD3, which is up in the Flathead somewhere. Yes?
Yeah, it's Columbia Falls, up the North Fork, and over to Essex.
Okay, and I know where Columbia Falls is. I don't know where the other two are. But I would like to point out I can get lost in my own house, so that happens. And then we have Noah Horan, who is running for HG84. So we do have a bit of a primary here tonight because we have Jill and Noah. But I think that's good because here's one of the things I got asked because I have a primary as well. And I got asked, well, what do you think of your primary competition? I'm like, it's great. Good Democrats are always good to have, and you need to have more people up there running. And if you're afraid to run, being in a primary is actually a really good thing because you can lose and learn a ton, or you can win and learn a ton. The problem with winning is that you have to continue. So if you were planning on not winning, I can guarantee you that will not happen the way you expected. Just because, in case you haven't noticed, the universe, it's terrible and likes to throw curveballs at everyone. So welcome to the show. Andrea, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you're running?
Yeah. I grew up in Columbia Falls, and it is an amazing place for a lot of reasons. Geographically, the people who live here. It's a small town, but it's awesome. I love it so much. And so as an adult, I went away for college. I lived in Utah for 4 years, coming back during the summers and working just because I, miss Montana. And then I've been back in the Valley since 2019, working at a local nonprofit dealing with food access. And, when I came back, I was doing AmeriCorps Vista. I was like, I'll just come back for a year and then maybe I'll leave again. And then I was like, I kind of want to stay. So I did it for a second year. And then they hired me on as staff. And I was like, okay, this is awesome. I'm doing a ton of great work in the community, dealing with food access. But I was like, what more can I do? And I was like, what'll get my name out there and make everyone dislike me? I should run for office, right? No, I really think that Columbia Falls is valuable, and it's different than the other areas. And I think we need someone representing Columbia Falls in the state legislature who knows the area, who is smart and intelligent, and can bring the issues that Columbia Falls cares about to the state and make something happen. And I think I'm that person. I think I have a really good feel for the area. I grew up here. I graduated from Columbia Falls High School. Like I said, I've been working and living in the community for the last 3 years as an adult, which is way different than growing up as a kid. So I think the perspective that I bring from what Columbia Falls was 20 years ago to what it is now is pretty valuable. And I really care about the community. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is that I want to do this service for our community.
Hey, that's Andrea, great. So why do you think people would hate you?
Just because everyone hates politics. But maybe that's just my dad.
I love that. I don't hate you. I'm glad you're running.
Thank you.
Hey, Noah, why don't you tell us why you're running?
Well, I'm born and raised in Helena, and I just, I really love it here. And, I've always wanted to do something in the political world. And I've served as a committee secretary in 2 legislative sessions, and, I always really enjoyed it. And I figured, why not run and give it a shot and see what happens and go from there. I love Montana and I love Helena, and I just really want to give back and represent people and do my best,
That's awesome. Kyle, did we ever ask you why you're running?
I'm not sure if you have, but I'm happy to play. Honestly, thank you for the invite in the conversation. I mean, I used to do nonprofit work for 20 years, and now I look back at that and realize how much that was public service already. Where in nonprofits we do so much work for good organizations. I think Andrea sort of brought that up of just helping out the community so much. And I was working with Intermountain Children's Services, which works with traumatized youth, and realized, and it was about 2016 when I was watching what was happening on national politics, but also on gubernatorial races, and just realizing that our foster care system was falling apart, and that Medicaid expansion was the most important thing that we could be doing to help kiddos at that time, is what sort of first launched me into politics, just to be that I thought I could do better than some of the other guys I saw out there, especially from my community, making sure that they were advocating to real issues, which I thought were, like I say, our foster care kid system, being able to get sure that families in their whole, their parents and the kiddos, were be able to access behavioral health access, but also health care. That's what sort of launched me into running. I ran against a person who was on city council for 28 years. And that's where I started, just realizing how much I needed to step up, and if I wanted to see a change, I could be the change. And then my time on city council has just really taught me how much our world intersects with state government, specifically through our highways. And in Kalispell, our highways are our Main Street and then a secondary Idaho Street, which are two major roads in the middle of Kalispell, and that's where most of our funding comes through. And if we want to have more connectivity through sidewalks and things like that, that all comes through how the state partners with the city and with the county. And that's what's bringing me into wanting to run for the legislature.
Very cool. Jill, I'm going to need you to take it back many, many years ago. What actually prompted you to run for because you were in the House before, right?
Yeah, so I was in the House from 2002 is when I actually won my first election in that November. And so 2003 was my first session in the legislature. So I was in from 2003 to 2009. And what happened to me is I got involved with my union. And so I got involved with, I was the president of my local for a number of years. And we had a good group of folks that were working really hard to find good candidates here in the East Helena area, actually all around Helena. And when you interview candidates, that is, I mean, Kyle, you said the same thing that exactly happened to me. When you interview candidates and you ask them questions and they know absolutely nothing about unions, they don't understand public services. They don't understand how do we have a great education system, which is because of the employees, the people who actually provide those educational opportunities to our kids. And so through that whole discussion, I finally figured out, you always think, people always say, oh my God, I got to be so smart to run for office. It's like, what I figured out is like, I'm way smarter than the people who are already doing this. So I think I definitely had it in the back of my mind to run. But so before I actually did run, I helped another labor candidate to run his race. I knocked doors for him. I helped do forums. I helped, do mailers. I did all of those things before I ever even thought about running. Because I really wanted to know how to do it. And so he ran in an open, the seat was actually open at that time. And trying to think if it was right after your mom was in, Kyle.
I think so. That's you're hitting the very end of mom's service, I believe.
Yep, that's exactly right. And so it was an open seat at that point. And so I found out 1 week before the filing date that this guy was not going to run at that time. He had run for the seat against that the other gal and had lost narrowly. It was really a close race. And so I found out like in 2002, like a week before it was time to get all signed up, that he wasn't going to do it. And I was like, oh, I really kind of wanted to do it. So I had a big discussion with my husband and said, hey, you're going to have to pick up a lot of slack if I'm going to do this. And he said, nope, go for it. This is what you want to do. I want to support you in doing it. So that's the reason I stepped into the race. And it was really just to be the voice of working people in Montana. It's one of the things that we don't hear a lot. People just go to work and they do amazing things at their jobs and provide quality services across this whole state. And they don't toot their own horn. They don't talk about how important they are. And that voice is lost in the legislature a lot of times. You don't hear about, we're just an FTE, a number on a piece of paper. We're not a person providing a service in a community that makes their children successful, that makes their small businesses actually do well. And so I decided that was the voice that I wanted to take to the legislature. And I think I've done a pretty good job at doing that.
Cool.
Awesome.
And I'm going to take a minute to explain why I'm running. I don't know anybody who actually, once they learn what's been going on with the PSC, would support any of the people that have been on the PSC for the last 10 years. And a lot of the people that have been talking about, oh, well, it's getting better. We've had people on there that are doing better with, being more responsible with the people's money, being more responsible to the people. What we've instead ended up with is 2 more people who don't understand the actual work that they're supposed to be doing, and they've been putting a lot of it off, and they're costing Montanans money. And considering all we face with climate and the economy and everything else that's been going on, it's really despicable that we have this commission that is charged with doing right by the ratepayers of Montana, and they don't do their job. So I'm running because I have the skills. I'm in the industries. I've been in them my entire life. I've told the joke. It's humorous to me, but it's not a joke. I'm 5th generation telecom. I own an internet company. I am used to doing all of the things that are required of regulated industries, and I understand why they're regulated, why regulations are important, how they can be destructive, why they must be managed, and all of those things. And I'm also one of the people that can take the very complex and in-depth and nerdy things that I really enjoy about the PSC, the deep ends of policy, and translate that to everyday English for everybody else so that they can understand what's going on as well, so that they can get a better education on what's happening, because that's such an important thing. I think about how it's funny, because I was talking to a friend of mine who, she's endorsing me for candidacy. She's held office in the state, and her first question was, what does the PSC do? And, these are elected officials. They have every reason to know, but they're focused on other things. And it is one of those things that can just fall by the wayside for all Montanans. So it's been an interesting story to try to tell to people, to get in front of people. But then once we're in there talking to people and we explain what's going on, it becomes a lot easier to tell them, hey, this is why I'm running. This is why it's important. This is why you should vote for me. So that's one of them.
And that's why Montanans should care about who is actually representing them.
Right. And I know we're just getting started. We're about 13 minutes into this. We just had a friend text me with, ooh, is it still going? I'm like, yeah, it is. It's still going. You could jump on and send us a question. That would be delightful. I'm going to toss in a question. And this was for Kyle from last week, and also for me. And it was about, I was going to look it up really quick to see if I could find it, but I haven't been able to find it yet. Which that doesn't mean anything. It's about social emotional learning. What is your stance on that, Kyle? Did you have a chance to look that up?
Now that you're reminding me, I did not look it up. I feel bad. Did you have a chance to look it up?
I did have a chance to ask people about it, which was even better. What is,
Okay.
Is it important? Is it something that we need to be worried about? And yes, it is important. It is something that we need to be worried about. Funny enough, it is something that they teach. It's not like it's a class, though. It's not like they sit kids down and go, today we're going to have social learning day, and you're going to learn how to be socialist. That doesn't happen. But social emotional learning is about making sure that kids have the skills to, easy, short-lived ways, have the skills to make friends and influence people. So it is an important thing. It teaches them about how to deal with their own emotions, how to deal with other people's emotions, recognize other people's emotions for what they are, and deal with it. So there's a lot that goes into it. I found that, in talking with a friend of mine who's an educator, they were very straightforward about how it is a very important topic for educators to be well versed in. It is not something that kids are directly taught. It is a functional way of teaching kids to deal with the world around them. So do I think it's important? Absolutely, because I deal with a bunch of emotional, engaged, sometimes irrational adults as they're, as we're fighting for things and people are upset about something, and being able to recognize and not counteract, but deal with whatever emotion they're expending without in any way dismissing what they're feeling, and validating their stance, letting them know that you understand it, and being able to connect with them. Those are all parts of those skills, and those are things that we all need as politicians. Those are things that we all need as people. So yes, it's really important that it's there. Is it something that I think they're going to be doing a Common Core test on? No, but I do think it is important that they learn.
And I would say I did sit down and talk this week with some administrators from schools, and the biggest thing that I took away from that was they really wanted the legislature to get out of talking about curriculum, because it's just not the wheelhouse that you're supposed to be dictating curriculum from. It's not where we should be picking and choosing just large mandates. When actually our Constitution and our the reason we have OPI and the reason we have school boards is that's where those conversations belong. And some of the just social issues that have been creeping into our politics, or nationalized politics, just how much, again, these administrators are just like that. Those are conversations that have happened for over 10 years. Two, really belong with teachers and administrators and community, able to have those community conversations about that. And that when we have those conversations, like we saw in the 21 legislature in Helena, it's so far away from where the reality is. And specifically, we were getting into some issues about school sports and bathroom issues and stuff like that. And part of it was just like people were being like, you're mandating things from the legislature is just ridiculous of what you're asking a teacher to do, because that's not where the conversation is. And you need to be able to have those conversations, and actually gym teachers have regular conversations with their administrators and take things appropriately to the school board when they need to. And that the locker room is totally different than even when I grew up and went to high school. I think more of taking in that we're supposed to be sensitive and everybody's supposed to be welcome, and there's already so much work happening in schools that have changed where that conversation is.
Fair enough. Let's see. Let's take the topics of the day since nobody is chiming in. Ooh, wait, I've got one. I love it when people actually send me notes. Let me drop this one in and we will have a question. I recently learned that as of 2020, only 57% of residential housing units are occupied by their owners. How do the candidates feel that this contributes to the housing scarcity, and how do they plan to address that specifically from their positions of power? Jill, you want to go first?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, this is a big deal, but here's the caveat for this. We believe in individual freedoms, right? We believe that people ought to be able to do with their stuff as much as they get to do what they want to do with their own stuff. And it's really hard for a legislator to say, hey, I'm going to take away some of your rights because I think it's for the common good. But I think as a legislator, you don't take people's rights away. What you do is you want to incentivize what you want people to do if you want them to make a change. And so in this case, what we have is a lot of those Airbnbs and all of those VRBOs that are out there, that I think that this is a lot of the problem. and then there are some, secondary homes, that sort of thing, which you're probably never going to get to. But what we can do is try to incentivize those groups of folks to make their stuff available for housing in areas, especially when we've had such a huge pressure in the last couple of years on housing within the state of Montana. The other thing that we can do and need to do is to incentivize building new housing starts for more reasonably priced areas. When we have, like in Bozeman, the median house is now at $800,000. Where would somebody that is going to the MSU even find a place to live in that town? They're trying to probably work, go to school. And how do you even find somewhere to live in a place like that? Same problem in Missoula. Same problem we're having here in Helena. There's just not affordable housing for folks that are not at the top rungs of our economy. And so we really have to put our muscle as legislators behind how do we incentivize contractors to want to build for that group of folks. And we had a great bill that came through the legislature. It was actually a bipartisan effort. And, it was Republicans and Democrats working together to do something really great for Montana. We already have a really great, it's basically an incentive, a tax incentive for them to go ahead and build some of these affordable housing units. And what it would allow for them to do is sell those credits to people who want to reduce their taxes. And so it's a great incentive for folks that really want to invest in housing. And so there's a couple of different programs. One you can do and it's 9% return, and the other one is only a 4% return. Well, we didn't have a lot of folks taking advantage of the 4% return, and the 9% money is pretty low amount. So there wasn't people that could do these huge housing developments using the 4% money. You had to kind of do smaller ones to make it worthwhile. And so with the 9% money or with the 4% money, you could do bigger ones if the state were to actually enhance that. And so that was the bill that we took through the legislature, and it actually made it to the governor's desk, and he actually vetoed it. It was the only housing bill that made it through the legislature. And so we ended up having to do a study bill, which is actually being looked at in this interim to try to find ways for the legislature to help incentivize building affordable homes for folks across our state. It is a crisis. There's that and childcare are the two biggest crises that we have in communities across the state. And I'm hoping that the legislature is hearing from folks on that particular issue, because I know I'm hearing it from my neighbors and friends. And you can't even afford to leave where you're at and go do something different and maybe enhance your own career, because if you were to sell your house, you could never find something to move into. So there's not a lot of people who are going to be upwardly mobile if they can't be mobile at all, and that is one of the things that I think is very scary.
Hey, Andrea, you want to take that as well?
Yeah. This is something kind of near and dear to my heart as a 26-year-old who would like to eventually own my house someday. And when houses are selling in Columbia Falls for $400,000 to $600,000, new builds are $800,000. No one would have expected that in Little Columbia Falls, especially when Whitefish is so close. But, Columbia Falls is kind of catching the overflow from Kalispell and Whitefish. And, Kalispell was one of the largest growing cities or micropolitan areas in the entire country this last year. Like, we're really, really feeling it. One of the things that I thought was interesting when I was doing some research about Columbia Falls specifically is that we have an average of, we have a higher than average homeowner rate. I think we're up around 70% in Columbia Falls, which is really cool. And, I do think a lot of people are living in their homes, but, as people get older, there probably are a lot of homes just sitting there, waiting for wills and stuff like that to take a place, and the kids might have moved away and then they have to come back and take care of the estate and stuff like that. So I think there's multiple reasons why some of the residential housing units are not occupied by their owners, especially in such an aging state like Montana. But I think there are things you can do, just like Jill said, to incentivize renting them out or selling them if no one's living in it, right? Like if you can't prove that you are a full-time resident or you're renting long-term, I would be in favor of increasing the taxes for houses that are short-term rentals, like, or just second homes sitting empty. Like, why aren't we incentivizing people to actually live in them or rent them out to workers and to people who are there full-time and contributing to the community and need somewhere to live? So I guess that would be my plan specifically. I'm not elected. I don't have the experience that Jill does. It was awesome to hear her talk about that bill. And it's really interesting. You know, you can do everything right, get it passed in the House, you can get it passed in the Senate, and then it can get vetoed by the governor. And that is why it is so important to elect people who are gonna, you know, get those things written and agreed on and passed. And we've been kind of spoiled the last 16 years with a Democrat governor. And so I think, well, Gianforte is this, it's going to be a little harder to actually address some of those things because he does have that veto power. And so if you find a bill that everyone agrees on, like, there is ways to veto the veto. But, you know, that's pretty involved. So, like I said, I guess my answer would be to incentivize people renting them out long term or living in them themselves. Property tax increases on houses that are not occupied by their owners.
No, what about you?
Well, I can say from, you know, I mean, we talk about hearing from constituents that this is an issue that's facing most people in Montana. I mean, I can speak from personal experience right now. It's ridiculous. Of course, this is anecdotal, but as recently as 2016, I was renting a 4-bedroom house here in Helena with 3 friends for $1,000 a month, and we were just looking for something new just last month, and we couldn't find a 3-bedroom for less than $1,900 a month. That's insane, the amount of the inflation just over the last 6 years and in the prices that people are asking right now. And obviously a huge part of that is that we've had this influx of new residents coming into the state during the pandemic and everything. So it's sort of hard to say how much of this is permanent and how much of this is temporary is sort of the way I'm looking at it right now in terms of there being sort of a rental bubble. In terms of what I specifically would do to address this issue, I don't have a specific plan for this particular topic, but I will say that while I was serving as a committee secretary during the 2019 session, I saw a lot of very disturbing landlord-renter bills come through the Judiciary Committee. And, you're as a committee secretary, you're supposed to be nonpartisan and just sitting there and holding your tongue. But it's very hard when it's something like that affects you on a personal level. And I would just say, if elected, obviously, those sorts of bills would be something that I would not support in any way whatsoever. Anything that strengthens landlords' ability to, wrongfully, in my opinion, impact their renters, their leasers. It's a very difficult issue, and I guess I would also point out too, part of it is that this is a national crisis. It's not just Montana. Obviously, we're dealing with it because we're a desirable state. We have a lot of tourism, and I think a lot of people are moving here just trying to get away from the big city. But this is happening all over the country in terms of the cost of living and the price of housing going up. So, I would be interested in seeing some sort of increased tax on short-term rentals and that sort of thing. I would have to give it some serious thought before I would endorse it, but I think that's one route you could go. There's all sorts of things. I just think, what Senator Cohenour was saying about incentivizing building these new multi-residential units, I think that's kind of the route that we need to go here, because there's no reason it can't be lucrative for both the property owners and the people who are renting from them. There's no reason that there should be a housing shortage when there's so much potential for it to work within the current framework for both the landlord and the renter.
Oh, you're muted, Kev. But it's fun to
Technical
listen to.
difficulties.
Gotcha.
You're singing.
I'm just doing my own thing. Airbnb is 2% of the residential units. It's part of the problem, but it's not the entire problem. And Jill, this is specifically to you. How does Jill answer the concern that new housing is going to be snatched up by investors? So we'll start with Jill. We'll go through everybody else. Kyle, I know I missed you, but you had already answered something like that last week. So
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is a part of the problem. So under these the programs that I was just talking about, when you actually get the additional credits from the federal government, and then the 4% would be from the federal government, and then hopefully additional from the state, you are actually required to keep that at the level of affordability that is dictated by the federal government, or you lose all of those credits that are generated by producing that housing. That's the reason why it can't be snatched up by investors, because even if investors were to come in and buy it, the requirement to hold that as affordable housing is stuck with that property for more than 40 years, which is the cool part about it, and why it is an amazing way to actually incentivize contractors and folks that are wanting to invest in local areas. They get the money to do it. And so it holds them to account for that period of time, or they lose the tax advantage of taking that money to produce that. And the way it pencils out is pretty awesome. And I can't do the calculations for you right now, but it's pretty awesome, and it makes it worthwhile for contractors and others to actually do these investments in a lot of different communities, because you can even do it in small towns, which is I think part of the reason why it would be so important for us as a Montana legislature to actually put some good money aside. We're going to have a lot of money, one-time only money, coming up in the next session. So if we were to put some aside in an affordable housing trust that we could then use to actually do a long-term plan on how we can get affordable housing across the state, I think that would be my specific ask of the legislature, is to put money aside specifically for that.
the other part of that, the follow-up on it, is why is affordable housing consistently defined as above the median local income? Because it's using federal numbers, is that correct?
Yeah. And well, actually, I'm unsure what that is asking, but I think for Montanans, we always think that we're middle class, and we're really not. Because the median income of the nation is quite a bit higher than the median income in Montana. And so that's why, there's a lot of folks that we would term or think of as being in the middle class, and they really aren't. We are a very rural state, and in some cases frontier, as Tester would tell you. And it's really, it puts us in a different boat, and we have to be the ones that invest in ourselves, I think. And that's what I would advocate for.
Okay. Andrea, Noah, do you have anything to add?
I'll be honest, housing is not an area that I feel like I'm well versed on, and it's something that I really want to dig into more deeply. So this is interesting just to be a part of the conversation here and hear the perspectives of folks who know a lot more about it than I do. And it's just, it affects me personally right now, and it's just a big issue for, I think, everybody in the state, whether you're a homeowner or not, it affects you, and I'm hopeful that we can make changes nationwide that will sort of address this, but it's not going to happen without a serious concerted effort on the state level. So
I think it's a really big issue. It's very complicated, and there's lots of moving parts within it. And when we talk about it on the state level, Montana's a huge state. We are very diverse within our towns. Like I'm coming from Columbia Falls, Kyle knows how to deal with this too. We're in a super touristy part of Montana, and that comes with its own problems. And so when we talk about Airbnb,
we try not to call tourist problems, though.
So, sometimes they are. And this is coming from someone who's, worked in the tourist industry, right? I feel like if you've lived in, next to any national park, you've probably done it at some point. And the transition for Columbia Falls from such an industry-driven town, with the lumber mill, with the aluminum plant, with stuff like that, we've really been going through a huge transformation over the last 20, 30 years. And it's especially sped up recently now that the national parks are so popular. And with COVID, people are traveling within the United States more. So it's really exploded. And so I think that the needs across the state are huge, but I also think it's acutely felt within the touristy areas. And that, it might not move as quickly if the development things that you're talking about, right? Like, it's hard to source materials, building's so expensive right now. Everyone keeps saying, we need more houses. And yes, that's true. But we also need to work with what we have, because maybe that's a little faster. And so Glenn asked a question. He says, does the legislature require a certain percentage of new housing to be low income, or is that a locality issue? I think in the last session, they actually kind of took it away as a locality issue and made it a state issue, but then they didn't require anything. Do you want to speak to that, Jill? You were there.
Yeah. And no, there is no requirement that by the legislature to have any certain percentage of new housing be low income. What dictates that is the person or the entity that's building it. And like in Helena, we actually have a housing coalition that kind of gets together and does some awesome things within our community. And they invest in a lot of these different areas also, but it really is a locality kind of an issue. And that's why, we have to give the tools to those areas to try to get them to move on this, because there is no requirement, not from the federal government or anybody, on doing it. But we all know it needs to be done. And so those local areas, and I think, Andrea, what you were talking about was the bill that actually took away the ability for somebody in a town like Missoula to have a mother-in-law place in the back that they could rent to college students. I mean, there was a huge article in the newspaper that the college wants to do some renovations on a lot of the student housing that is owned by the college, and they're kicking students out. They got nowhere to go. And so in Missoula, they had specifically been allowing for folks to go ahead and build like something above their garage, or have a little mother-in-law house in the backyard. And they completely took the ability for them to do that away at the legislative level. And why is that our spot? It's not our spot. We should not be doing that. And localities should do what they need to do for their citizens, because those locally elected officials are accountable to their own towns. And I think that they're closest to the needs, they're closest to the problems, they're closest to the solutions. And we as a legislature should keep our nose out in a lot of these areas. If it's not health and safety and the common good at this higher level, there's a lot of innovation that could be going on in these local communities, and we should let them do it.
The one I was talking about was the inclusionary zoning. I think it was really only Whitefish and Bozeman that was acting on it. They're really trying to put the effort into having workforce housing, because so many people who live in those areas, they have high paying jobs, they can afford it, but they still need someone to make them coffee in the morning. And soon there's really not going to be anyone there who's going to do that. And so taking away those local tools is not very Montanan to me. I think that we need local solutions for the local places, right? Like, what works in Eastern Montana might not work in Columbia Falls and Whitefish just because we're so different.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay.
Yeah. That inclusionary zoning is the locally elected officials saying that if you're going to do a housing development, a portion of it does have to be affordable housing. And yeah, again, same thing. I think those locally elected officials are the ones that should be deciding how the growth should happen in their areas. And you have it exactly right.
Yeah, I think you're hitting it. The other thing about that is it's the way the Constitution was written and the way our democracy was to, one, give local control, sort of that home first idea that you're able to do that. But that's also the opportunity to have more of an incubators that let Missoula try what's working in Missoula. Maybe then that get picked up. For example, one thing which I've been researching while looking at affordable housing, going out and looking over at Sydney and what they were doing when they hit their growth event, because I think that's sort of similar to what we're experiencing here in the Flathead. And one of the things that they did there, which I think is something I would take to the legislature, which is really focusing on public employees, our teachers, our law enforcement, because we as the state of Montana all invest in those individuals' housing, and so being able to say, well, the state might focus on public employees' housing and making sure that there's more housing available for teachers or for the sheriff's department. That might be a way that we could also come into the game, but I think local controls where the solutions are.
Yeah, for sure. I know specifically in Columbia Falls, they've lost out on hiring teachers because there was nowhere for them to live. They're trying to hire more police officers right now because I think they're a couple short. And one of the things they ask in their interview is, do you already have housing? Because we can't hire you if you have to find housing because you're not going to find it.
It is. I just think it's interesting. It's astounding to me how many stories I've heard, friends here in Helena who suddenly have coworkers who just moved here from other parts of the country and didn't even have housing lined up, and then suddenly they don't know what they're going to do, and they can't go back to where they came from because they spent all their money getting here, and it's these are people who are employed and they want to come to Montana, which is a great place to live, and they want to contribute to our state, and they want to be a part of this wonderful community, and they can't even find housing. I don't know. It's a very serious issue, and I do think it needs to be solved primarily at the local level. It's insane to me for the legislature to be saying carte blanche, this is what you need to do statewide,
Yeah. We've got a comment from Bree McLaurin, which is, it's always concerning to see more and more banks every day getting built when we need more housing. So obviously Bree's been driving around Helena because we have a few of them. It's ridiculous.
I would add on to Bree. I mean, and it's also, I don't know, up here in the Flathead, all of our town pumps were able to expand and have new facilities. I think that it is part of it. What's hard is that those businesses have been very creative of taking their PPE loans and being able to bring down the money to be able to use it for themselves. Is the state being able to do the same thing for the Montana citizens? Because we need to be able to bring that down to build some of that housing. Because it's not the workforce housing and the housing that we're missing isn't just going to build itself by the marketplace. It's one of those things where speculation and everything is not going to take us to that solution, and you have to put some public effort into creating that, or like you say, you can have people who move here and don't have a house, and that's going to be our problem. So.
Mm-hmm.
Typing. I'm putting things in. Someone just sent this to me as a link in the KPAX report on the new affordable, in quotes, builds happening in Missoula. We're seeing $250K for studios and $450K for townhouses. That is not affordable. What's the problem with that is that it's based off of this thought that you can make affordable housing if you're a contractor, and you build it based on, it's going to be available for somebody who's making 120% of the median in the area. And that is not helpful to people who are actually facing poverty and houselessness. So we probably need to be doing better on this. The the side that I come down on with most of this, and this was something that I hope we're going to get to talk about next week with Sarah Novak, because she's going to be on. She had a tweet following up on a lot of these is, you know what? You don't need to own 4 houses and have them all be effectively hotels. You can have them as long-term rentals, and as you own more, you should pay more in taxes on them. So I think it'd be better long-term if we started looking at the taxes as regulations to incentivize people to be better to their communities. Which is a nice way to go into. I have another question, and I'm going to be very, very terrible on this one because it's about the PSC, but I'm going to put it in there. This is one I love. How does the PSC protect utility workers, and what can it be doing differently? To answer the first part of the question is they are supposed to, they do not. They let most of the utilities do whatever they want to do and foist that work off to insurance companies like State Fund or Victory or Chubb that handle workers' comp. They are not active in working for utility workers on any regular basis. The big thing that they can be doing, aside, on top of doing all the things that you need to do to make everything that you have a safe working environment. The other thing that you can do is be investing in your infrastructure, because as your infrastructure fails, that is an unsafe working environment. I don't know if you know this, but generally linemen shouldn't be working on something that catches fire. And that's the thing. We have in Helena telephone poles that are literally 30 years older than I am. And that is not just critical infrastructure, but it is literally a chance for this town to burn to the ground. We saw what happened in California with the power poles and transformers that hadn't been replaced, and they were just 30 to 35 years old. When they got hit by winds, they burned down billions of dollars. They killed hundreds of people. We had the Denton fire this last winter. I believe that was in November, December. Is that right? I'm not losing my mind. It was literally winter. And a town burned to the ground because of old infrastructure. And when you're talking about worker safety, when you're talking about the PSC and what they can do for worker safety, you're not just talking about, what are they doing to make sure that they have solid ladders, that they have strong ropes, that they know how to tie knots when they're climbing things, that they've been trained well to do the climbing, to deal with the high voltage wires, to understand how copper is interconnected. But you're also talking about making sure that you're investing in the infrastructure so they aren't put in a position where they're having to, in 20-mile-an-hour winds, at negative temperatures, fix wires because people are dying because they don't have power, because something wasn't replaced last summer because they didn't feel like it was necessary for them to do. And that's the sort of thing that the PSC should be looking at, because it's not just protecting any one individual at the moment that they're on a job site. It's protecting that person, their lives, their livelihood, and their family by making sure that everything that the PSC is in control of, everything that the PSC does, has the proper maintenance to make sure it's capable of doing the job that we are asking of it. And that if it can't, it's getting replaced in a way that's safest for everyone. And that requires actual work. That requires actually doing the job of the PSC. And
don't you think, Kev, that there should be a required investment in the maintenance of all of this stuff that the power companies have? Because they are not doing that.
Right. And, we look at what happened with the dam when all of a sudden it decided to fail. I don't remember the name of the dam off the top of my head, but it was just this last spring. It decided to fail. And it's not a generation dam. It's just a water control dam. But downstream of it is the dam that has the generators on. Well, it stops flowing water. It's the middle of winter. You can't tell because the ice is over everything. The fish underneath die. There's no water going down to the electrical units. Those generators stop. That causes the entire system to freeze up, which causes a power spike event, which takes out the power for Montana. And it's 21 below, middle of the night, and nobody knows why the generators are down, because they don't have any warnings on the dam, because they didn't bother to fix their sensors. And they didn't have somebody stationed there to check it. Those sound like a series of unfortunate events, but I don't know if you've looked at the news lately, but all we've had is a series of unfortunate events that are basically set up by, we haven't decided to spend our money wisely, and we have not told these companies that they have to do the same. And so we have allowed this to go on too long. we have absolutely made it a problem, and we need to have somebody in the PSC who's going to make sure that this happens. That's why I'm running. That's why I need help in the legislature. That's why I hope all of you will eventually be in it. I mean, I realize we got a primary, so it's weird to say I want both of you in it, but I do, because I think you'll both be great. Oh, there's Glenn saying thank you for the opportunity to chime in. Absolutely, Glenn. Bring more people, because this is awesome. We love having people step in. I've got one. This is one that we all get to talk about because it's an area that touches us both. And it's from Bree. What do you think we could do to get passenger trains?
Can I ask, Bree, where are you from in Montana?
Bree's from here in Helena.
Oh, in Helena. Okay, I was gonna say we already have passenger trains where I'm from. It goes along the High Line. You know, it connects the Amtrak all across the country. I think there are ways that we can do better and encourage people to take public transportation or do that instead of driving. But I'll let people from other areas of the state take this one.
So, what area are you from? Because we have it, neener. That is probably the best answer ever. And it's true. I mean, the thing is, we have the High Line train, and my take on this is, yes, we still have a train that goes through Montana along the High Line. And I think that's really great. I'm very sad that we have a train that goes along the High Line that has the same speeds that it had when it was first put in place over 100 years ago. We see in other countries, high-speed rail is actually a reality. And everybody, I remember bringing up high-speed rail when I first went to Japan as a kid. So literally like 38 years ago. We were talking about, the bullet trains and how cool they were. And everybody was talking about, yeah, but it's just Japan and it's a small country and it would never work in a country the size of the United States. And then China did it. I'm like, you know what? I don't like to be nationalist in any way, but I think if China can do it, we can do it. Sorry. We absolutely can. American ingenuity should allow us to be able to do all of these things. And I think we should have it. I have an interesting fact for you. There was 2 studies that happened in the early 2010s. One of them was how much will it cost to do high-speed rail across the U.S. and it's basically 3 lines going east-west, 5 going north-south. So there's some interesting grid things going on. That's not exactly north-south. It's not exactly east-west, but that's the basics of it. Total cost to do that at the time was $270 billion, which sounded just outrageous until you found out that to do both the Summer and Winter Olympics in the next 2 years, because the summers were coming up and winter were 2 years out, was $210 billion. And all I could think is, well, if you take the $270 million that we need and we build the trains, we could actually connect all the old Olympic villages that we did from the beginning of time and have all of the Olympics scattered across the United States and connected by bullet trains. It'd be super easy to do. And I thought that would be awesome. And I'm thinking, we could do that. I don't know where Kyle went.
Oh, we lost him.
We lost Kyle. Everybody, if you're up at the Flathead and you see him, please tell him we lost him.
It's still the argument that bullet trains wouldn't work in the United States is absurd to me. I would think they would work better here than in any other sort of, small European densely populated countries like the United Kingdom, where they do have fairly high-speed rail. France, Germany, these are very densely populated countries with, towns and villages that have been there for hundreds, or literally 1,000 years. And yet they still find the land to build these rail systems. This is a huge empty country. Like, we can do that. We have the land to do it. It's a matter of getting the public interested in this sort of thing. It's a matter of finding the funding. As for whether I would see it as viable in Montana, I mean, I've heard a suggestion that they could create a new line that would run from Missoula to Helena down to Bozeman and that sort of thing. And I think that would be great in a perfect world. I'm skeptical that we could really see a concerted effort to actually get that to happen. But I think it's something that should be seriously looked into and considered.
I think connecting, Eastern Montana even to Western Montana, that would be one of the best places to put, like a high-speed rail. It's so flat. And it could work really well. And then it would connect people to better services like healthcare and mental health services and stuff like that, which I think is really, really needed in some of the more rural parts of the state. I think anything that, allows people to connect to services is super important, especially because not everyone can afford a car. And gas is really expensive right now. Someone would rather, buy a train ticket instead of buying a tank of gas. And then they can sit and read a book on a train or do their work or homework or something instead of spending all their time driving. Montana is such a big state. You can drive forever and not get out.
Yep. I'm going to tie into that.
So
People, I won't mention any of their names, but their initials are Kyle Waterman, Jill Cohenour, and Andrea Gates. Asked a question of what the PSC can do to improve internet in towns like Kalispell and Columbia Falls and Helena and East Helena. Funny enough, I do have to say this. The PSC doesn't actually regulate internet. It's got this weird quasi pullout thing that happened because internet is served in a multitude of different ways and has some interesting competition. I'll put that in air quotes. So it's been let out for a while. It's going to take a little bit to get the PSC to be able to do it because it has to be given the authority by one of two sources, either from the feds by declaring it a Title II utility or from the legislature getting their act together and actually saying we want this regulated. The good news is that we are seeing a lot of people on all sides of the aisles in every single political discussion that they're having, talking about how bad their internet is, how bad their bills are, how bad it is to deal with, what they would rather do with their time than argue about it. But it is coming up, but it's going to take some force of one of those two things. I honestly think that we stand a really good chance in this next legislative session to lean in and say, hey, we need this done. We need to actually have the PSC on this so that they can actually go out and test and build maps that make sense. We have the Connect MT map that just came in. It was developed in a black box. The data in it is incorrect. I know because I work in the internet and I can go out and actually test those areas where supposed services actually are and tell you the numbers are incorrect. So it becomes a problem. I do think it needs to be better. One of the greatest things that can happen with trains is that when that's being built, fiber can be put in as well to help connect those places. So it's very interesting. It's definitely something that we need to do. Sorry, I've got like 14 messages coming up at once because people are like, I have another one. Let's see. I'm going to throw up this. We should be able to have high-speed trains. Good for all of us, especially since our roads are getting busier. Plus, who wants to drive? I would much rather sit in a train. If you ever get a chance to get on a bullet train, do it. You will absolutely be impressed with what you can do. Could the legislature choose to invest all the money we have from COVID into this, or would it have to be a different revenue source? We're limited in what we can do with that by the ARPA rules, what it was funded for. Plus, we have to have a governor that actually accepts the money and distributes it for what it's for. For a little transparency, Bree does head up an agency that works with mothers and children to make sure that they are getting all that they need to be healthy. And we know that one of the things that Governor Gianforte has not done is actually distribute millions of dollars that we have to make school lunches free for all students. So well done, Greg.
Yeah.
Well, it's unfortunate.
Took away SNAP monies from the extended SNAP monies from a lot of these families as well, as soon as he possibly could.
And
we spend a lot of money to take that money away, too.
Yeah. Right? I work at a food access nonprofit in the Flathead Valley, and we work with local farmers during the farmers market season to do this thing called double SNAP dollars, which is really cool. It doubles people's money that they choose to spend when they choose to spend their SNAP dollars on local growers. It's really, really cool. It keeps those federal dollars local, keeps them circulating in our economy. And the more money that is invested in that and is feeding people Montana food is really, really important. And it was really sad that that money's no longer in Montana.
Yeah. We've got another one, and this comes in. It's a little bit longer. I was told to take my daughter to Missoula for mental health evaluation because the wait list was 18 months long here. I'm not the only person who's been told the same thing. A train would make those services so much more affordable or accessible, and that's not even accounting for the impact on climate change when there's investment in public transit. I'm curious to know why NOAA is so skeptical of the viability of that plan. No, you want to answer?
I'm skeptical just because I feel like this is something that is going to take some huge compromise in the legislature to get done, and I'm just skeptical that with the Republican-dominated legislature in the state of Montana, we could pass the kind of legislation that would be needed to expand the access to rail systems in the state. It would, I mean, obviously, who's going to build it as well? Are we talking about a private or a public rail system? Ideally, I would want to see a state-owned one, but I'm skeptical that we would have the money to do something like that. So I think it's a really great idea. I'd love to see it. I don't know that it's really a feasible thing right now. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on this in terms of where you think funding would come from.
I'll jump in real quick on that. I mean, I do think no, I think you're right. I mean, rail is really expensive in moving there. That's part of the reason where, like, I work with our public transportation board here in Kalispell, and that's our buses. And that might actually be the quickest and most mobile system that we're able to mobilize, because you don't have to build a whole rail infrastructure to be able to do that. And there's a huge potential there. I think what you leverage and use is transit authorities. The state constitution defines how to use authority, so we can use regional. And again, it comes down to local control, though, because my thought is that here in the Flathead, where we are experiencing so many tourists, we should get the tourists off the road and have them pay into a bus system that would help out seniors and workforce. There's ways that we could think smarter, but also use the systems that we already have in existence and amplify them.
And I would follow up on what Kyle just said and say that other states would have to jump on board. It would be really difficult for the state of Montana to just do this much.
A little tiny high-speed rail right across Montana stops at the Idaho border. Bye.
I mean, well, and that's a great point, because I mean, if California can't even get it to happen from, I don't remember exactly what the plan was, but it was something like San Diego to San Francisco or something like that. If they can't even get it to happen, then I'm skeptical we could get something like that built in Montana. It's a perfect world thing. I would love to see it. It would be awesome, but I'm skeptical that would work. And I think what Kyle said about the busing and then just the using the infrastructure that's already there, i.e. highways, I think that's a more viable option. We could pursue incentives to expand bus. I don't know. I don't know exactly where I stand on this. I'm just skeptical that would be an actually economical thing for the state of Montana to pursue.
And I think, we might not be at the point where we can build a high-speed rail, right? Like, that might be a little far out and not financially there for Montana. But other states have, like, transit authorities, and they're building, trains that go between the bigger cities. Like, maybe there is potential for a train to go between Helena and Missoula, or Helena and Bozeman, and connect some of or Billings even, connect some of those bigger ones. Let's start a little bit smaller, and then we can work up to some of those bigger things, right? Like, Montana has barely over 1 million people, and that's pretty recent, right? Like, we're still, 10, 15, 20 years behind some of the other states as far as our infrastructure goes. So maybe jumping to high-speed rail isn't the right call, but it's certainly something that we should be looking forward to and having that as an option in the future.
Yeah, and so it sounds like most candidates here are willing to commit to throwing your weight behind high-speed rail in the next session. Is that right? Yeah?
I certainly think it's something that should be explored. Yeah, I'm not going to say that I would commit to definitely supporting it, but I think it's something that should be explored. And long term, I would love to see something like that. But I'd love to see something like that nationwide, not just for Montana.
Yeah.
Right.
Drew Hollinger brought up a cool thing about health, and I think that is something that needs to be expanded in Montana, right? Our rural health services are really hard to access and they're expensive, and mental health is a big issue in Montana. So I think, expanding our hospitals and expanding training programs in Montana, like we need more nurses, we need more doctors, we need more psychologists. I think supporting that is a really cool thing. Thanks, Drew.
Yeah. And Drew, I would say the same thing. It's like we focus on what folks ask us questions about. So we really appreciate you actually dropping in a question that we can and work with here at the Candidate Convo. That's what we're here for, is to actually answer questions that people want to know something about. And I hope that we've provided that for you tonight in a little way. We have talked about mental health services and that in our prior candidate combos. So you can always go back and look at the ones that have already been produced and are out on the internet or where is it, Kev?
Yes, they're available on our social medias. You can generally find them on my page. You can find them on the Lewis and Clark Central Committee page. And yes, I did just say because I had to think of the word. One of the things that you realize in having these conversations, Drew, is that while it is very hard to be perfect in the way that we're speaking, I think saying that we sound uneducated is a little bit harsh, mostly because we're at least talking to people. We have made this an open forum. We've let anybody come in here. We even let trolls show up, so you can see things like Zach calling me a load of barnacles. And that I think you, the Wiggles, and Scooby-Doo all blow boat people. Those are things that I think Zach should take up with his mother, because I'm sure she's going to be so proud of what he's doing in a public forum like this. And those are the things that, we face as candidates as we're trying to do the right thing. I'm glad, Drew, that you showed up. I think it's amazing that you came in here and had good questions for us. We have so many things that we want to talk about. Obviously, we're all doing different races. We are facing a bunch of different people that are out there, and we all have different ideas on how this can be better. So we've already made it to 8 o'clock. We're actually running a little bit long this week. So thank everybody for being here. We will be back next week. We don't know everybody that's going to be here, but I am super excited that Sarah Novak has confirmed for next week. So we'll have some people that have been here before, some people that are brand new, and we'll be having another discussion about all the things that are there. So for everybody that's at home, please write down your questions over the next week. Hey, if you think of something that you'd want us to answer, by all means, you can send it in early. I keep a running list of all the things that people have asked me throughout the week. I put it in my notes, and generally I remember to open them and post those in so that people can see them. Have a wonderful evening, and it was really nice seeing everybody. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for hosting, Kev. Thank you.
Thanks for putting this on.